The town of Riverdale was usually a quiet place at night. Most of the houses stood dark under the glow of the street lamps, and the streets were empty except for the sound of crickets. In one corner of the neighborhood lived a woman named Maya, who had returned to Riverdale after serving in the U.S. Marines. To most people, she seemed like any other neighbor, calm, polite, and private. Very few people knew about her past or the discipline she carried within her. Maya's house was small but neat. She had bought it with her savings and decorated it in a simple way. In the living room there were family photos, a few medals in a box, and a folded Marine uniform hanging carefully in her closet. To her, the uniform was more than cloth. It was a reminder of courage, duty, and strength. That night the clock ticked toward 1 a.m. Maya was asleep on the couch, a book resting beside her. She had been reading but had dozed off before finishing the last chapter. The silence in her home was suddenly broken by a faint sound. At first it seemed like the wind tapping against the window, but soon the noise grew louder, like footsteps approaching the porch. Maya opened her eyes slowly. Years of military training had sharpened her senses, and she could tell when something was not right. She listened closely. There it was again, a creak on the wooden step, then another. Someone was at her door. She did not panic. Instead, she sat still for a moment, letting her mind grow sharp and clear. She reached for the small lamp, but before she could switch it on, she heard a soft knock on the door, followed by a whisper. "Check the window," a voice said outside. Maya's eyes narrowed. These were not friendly visitors. She could hear more than one person, at least 3, maybe 4. They were trying to be quiet, but the silence of the night made their whispers easy to catch. She stood up silently and moved across the living room. Her steps were light, almost soundless. She didn't want them to know she was awake. From the corner of the curtain, she peeked through the window. 4 shadows stood outside. They were not neighbors. Their postures were tense and their voices low but urgent. One of them was holding something that looked like a crowbar. Maya felt the old instinct of training rise inside her. She was no longer simply a woman at home. She was a Marine again, alert and ready. But she also knew one thing: there was no need to rush. Her calmness was her greatest weapon. The men outside were trying to force the lock. She could hear the scraping of metal against the door handle. Instead of fear, Maya felt a cold focus settle in. She moved back to her room and opened her closet. The uniform hung there, pressed and ready. For a moment she touched it with her hand. She remembered the nights in training camps, the sound of boots against gravel, the voice of her commander pushing her to go beyond her limits. She remembered missions where silence and discipline had meant the difference between safety and danger. All of that training was inside her still. She took the uniform from the hanger and laid it on the bed. She did not put it on yet. Instead, she reached for the folded flag that rested beside it, another reminder of her service. These symbols gave her strength, and strength was what she needed now. The door shook slightly. They were trying harder now. One of them muttered, "Hurry up. We don't have all night." Maya returned to the living room, her mind racing. She thought of her options. She could call the police, but by the time they arrived, the men might already be inside. She could hide, but hiding was never her way. She had faced tougher situations before. Instead, she decided on something else, something bold. She opened the small wooden chest near her couch and took out the medals she had earned. Then she went back to the bedroom, picked up the Marine uniform, and slipped it on. The fabric felt familiar, almost like armor. She straightened the collar, fastened the buttons, and stood tall in front of the mirror. Her reflection was not just Maya, the quiet neighbor. It was Maya, the Marine, strong, calm, ready. The men outside were growing impatient. The scraping turned into banging. One of them cursed under his breath, angry at the lock. Maya moved closer to the door. Instead of fear, she felt a strange calmness spread through her chest. She was not trapped. They were the ones walking into something they could not handle. She flicked on the porch light suddenly. The glow startled the men. From inside, Maya could see them clearly now. Their eyes widened as they looked up at the door, unsure if someone had noticed them. Maya waited silent. Then she stepped back into the shadows of her living room, letting the light outside reveal their nervous faces. She stood straight, the Marine uniform sharp against her frame, and opened the door slowly. The creak of the hinges was enough to freeze them in place. They had expected a scared woman, maybe someone helpless and sleepy. Instead, what they saw made their blood run cold. There stood Maya in her U.S. Marine uniform, her posture strong, her expression steady. Her eyes locked onto theirs with the discipline of a soldier who had seen far more than midnight intruders. The silence between them stretched heavy. None of the men moved. Their bravado cracked in that single moment. They had broken into many houses before, but never into the home of someone like this. Maya spoke at last, her voice calm but firm. "You chose the wrong house." The words cut through the night like steel. The men looked at one another. Their hands, which had been gripping tools and crowbars, slowly lowered. For the first time since arriving, doubt filled their faces. One of them whispered nervously, "She's a Marine." And in that frozen moment, the night shifted. The men outside the house froze as if time had stopped. Their plan had been simple: enter quietly, search quickly, and leave before anyone noticed. But now they stood face to face with Maya, who looked nothing like the person they had expected. She was calm, firm, and standing in her Marine uniform as if she had been waiting for them all along. Maya's voice still echoed in their heads. "You chose the wrong house." The tallest man, who seemed to be the leader, swallowed hard. His hand still held the crowbar, but his grip was weaker now. He had faced locked doors before, but never a door that opened to a Marine. The second man shifted uneasily. "What do we do?" he whispered to the others. Maya stood silently, her eyes scanning each of them. She was not afraid. Her training had taught her how to read people. She noticed the nervous twitch in their hands, the way they glanced at each other for direction. They were not soldiers. They were not even prepared for resistance. They were only bold in the dark, but in the light of her porch their courage melted. Finally, Maya stepped forward. She did not shout. She did not wave her arms. She simply stood taller, letting the uniform speak for itself. "You have 10 seconds to leave," she said in a low, steady voice. The men hesitated. 10 seconds felt like a lifetime. "Listen, we didn't mean any harm," the leader muttered, his eyes darting nervously. Maya didn't blink. 9. The men shifted again. One of them whispered, "She's serious." 8. Her voice was calm but sharp. Each number pressed against them like a weight. The men backed up a step. Their courage faltered more with every second. But the leader tried to stand his ground. "You don't scare us," he said, though his voice shook slightly. 7. Maya's eyes locked on his. She didn't move, but her presence filled the doorway like an unspoken warning. The man with the crowbar lowered it slowly. He could feel sweat on his palms. "Come on, let's just go," one of the others urged, like the night air grew heavy. Even the crickets outside seemed to have gone silent, as if nature itself was waiting for the choice these men would make. Finally, the leader exhaled loudly, as if releasing all his false courage at once. He motioned with his hand and the others began to step back. Their shoes scraped against the porch steps as they retreated. Maya continued counting, her eyes never leaving them. 5. By now the men were moving quickly. The streetlight above them cast long shadows as they turned toward the sidewalk. 4. The leader glanced back once, his eyes meeting hers. In that brief moment he saw something he had never seen before. Not just authority, but absolute control. Maya was not someone to test. 3. They were almost at the end of the driveway. Their breaths came in quick gasps like people running from a fire. 2. The leader muttered, "Let's get out of here," and they broke into a run. By the time Maya reached 1, the street was empty. The men had vanished into the darkness, their footsteps fading with distance. Maya stood at the doorway a moment longer. She listened carefully to be sure they were truly gone. The silence returned, broken only by the faint hum of the porch light. She closed the door gently and locked it. But instead of relaxing, she stayed alert. She knew that sometimes fear made people foolish, and there was always a chance they could return. She walked back to her living room, still in her uniform, and sat on the couch. Her heart was steady. She had not raised her voice, she had not used force, yet the strength of her presence alone had been enough to send them away. But Maya was not satisfied. She knew danger had knocked on her door tonight, and danger rarely came only once. Memories of the past as she sat quietly, her eyes drifted toward the medals on her table. Each one told a story, of nights on watch, of missions in silence, of moments when fear could not be allowed to win. Her mind traveled back to the desert, where the air was hot even at night. She remembered standing guard with her unit, knowing that any shadow might hide a threat. She had learned then that true strength was not loud. It was silent, patient and unshakable. Tonight had been a test of that strength, and she had passed. But still questions lingered in her mind. Who were those men? Why had they chosen her house? Was it random, or had they been watching her? Maya stood again and walked to the window. She pulled the curtain slightly and looked outside. The street was empty, but her instincts told her this was not the end. She would not live in fear. She had faced storms far greater than this, but she would also not ignore the signs. The next morning, the sun rose slowly, painting the sky with soft shades of orange. For the rest of the neighborhood, it was an ordinary morning, but for Maya, the air still carried the memory of the night. She brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, her uniform folded neatly beside her. She had not worn it in years, but last night, it had reminded her of who she truly was. As she sipped her coffee, there was a knock on the door. This time it was gentle and careful. She opened it to find her neighbor, Mr. Allen, standing with a newspaper in hand. "Morning, Maya," he said kindly. "Did you hear anything strange last night? My dog kept barking around 1 o'clock. Thought I saw some people running down the street." Maya studied his face. He was older, with silver hair and kind eyes. He had lived in Riverdale for decades and knew everyone. "I heard something," she said softly. Mr. Allen frowned. "This neighborhood isn't what it used to be. If you ever feel unsafe, don't hesitate to call me. I may be old, but I can still keep an eye out." Maya smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mr. Allen. I'll be fine." He nodded, though his eyes held concern. "Well, just remember, you're not alone here." As he left, Maya closed the door and thought about his words. Not alone, but in many ways she was. People around her saw only a quiet woman living in a small house. They didn't see the battles she had fought, the discipline she carried, or the strength she kept hidden. Still, she was grateful for neighbors like Mr. Allen. A plan forming later that day, Maya walked through her house, checking every window, every lock. She studied the doorframe carefully. The marks left by the crowbar were still visible, a reminder of the attempt. She decided it was time to be ready for whatever might come next. She would not wait for danger to return unprepared. She took out a notebook and began writing. On the first page, she listed what she had seen. 4 men, nervous but bold, one carrying a crowbar, voices uncertain. On the second page, she wrote possible reasons: random break-in, mistaken target, or planned attempt. Her pen moved firmly. This was not just her house. This was her ground, and she would protect it. The quiet before the storm that night, Maya sat again by her window, her uniform folded beside her on the couch. She watched the street, calm but alert. Hours passed. The town grew silent once more, but inside her heart she knew this was not over. The men who had run into the night would not forget the sight they had seen. They might return, whether out of anger, shame, or revenge. If they did, she would be ready. Because Maya was not just a woman in a small town. She was a Marine, and a Marine never turned away from a challenge. The sun shone brightly over Riverdale, but for Maya, the morning light did not erase the memory of the night before. She moved through her home with calm precision, checking every door and window again. The scratches on her front door stood like small scars, proof that someone had tried to break in. She pressed her palm against the wood for a moment, her mind replaying the scene of 4 shadows standing under her porch light. They had run, but running did not always mean surrender. Sometimes it meant retreat, planning, and returning stronger. Maya understood this well. She had seen it in training and in missions. A retreating enemy was not always defeated. Often, they came back with new determination. The intruder's thoughts. While Maya spent her morning in quiet watchfulness, the 4 men who had come to her door the night before were gathering in a small garage on the other side of town. The leader, whose name was Ray, paced back and forth. His friends sat on broken chairs, their faces uneasy. "I told you she was serious," said one of them, a man called Tom. "You saw the way she looked at us. She wasn't scared at all." Ray stopped pacing. "She caught us off guard, that's all. We weren't ready for her. She was wearing that uniform," another added. "A Marine uniform. Did you see how straight she stood? Like we were nothing." Ray clenched his fists. He hated how the memory made him feel small. "So what, she's just one person. We're 4. But she didn't even raise her voice," Tom muttered. "And still we ran." The room grew silent. Each of them remembered that moment at the porch. They had felt like children standing in front of a teacher who already knew all their mistakes. It was not just the uniform. It was her presence, her calmness, her unshaken control. Ray slammed his hand against the wall. We can't let this go. If we do, everyone will know we were scared off by a single woman. But what if she's more than just a woman? Whispered the youngest one. Ray glared at him but didn't answer. Deep inside, even he wondered the same thing. Maya's discipline back at her home. Maya finished her inspection and sat at her table with her notebook. She added new details. The leader had been tall, the second man restless, the third younger and nervous, the fourth silent but watchful. She did not know their names, but she remembered their movements, their tones, and the way they shifted when she counted down. Every detail mattered. After writing, she stood and prepared breakfast. Her movements were simple and steady, just as they had been during her years in service. Even in calm moments, discipline guided her. Every action, no matter how small, had its order. Yet as she ate, her eyes often drifted to the window. She was not afraid, but she was alert. She knew danger often returned when least expected. A visit from a friend later in the afternoon, her doorbell rang. This time the sound was friendly, not secretive. Maya opened the door to see her old friend Clara, who lived a few streets away. Clara carried a basket of fresh bread. Thought you might like some, she said with a smile. Maya accepted it with gratitude. Thank you, Clara. But Clara's smile faded as she studied the marks near the lock on Maya's door. What happened here? Maya paused. She did not want to spread fear, but she also knew Clara was a true friend. Someone tried to come in last night, she said calmly. Clara's eyes widened. Are you serious? Did you call the police? I handled it, Maya replied softly. Clara shook her head in amazement. Only you could say something like that with such calm. Please be careful. This town is not as safe as it used to be. I know, Maya said. But don't worry. I'll be fine. Clara left after a while, but her worried expression stayed in Maya's mind. It reminded her that fear could spread quickly among those unprepared. She decided then that if the intruders returned, she would not only defend her home but also make sure the neighborhood stayed safe. The men returned to watch that night. The 4 men did not come to her door. Instead, they parked their old car a block away and watched from a distance. The streetlight glowed over Maya's house as she sat inside reading a book. Ray gritted his teeth. Look at her. She doesn't even lock herself away. She acts like she's untouchable. Maybe she is, Tom whispered. Ray turned sharply. No one is untouchable. We just need the right plan. They watched in silence as Maya moved from her living room to her kitchen, her posture always steady. To them, it was as if she knew they were there, even though she never looked outside. After an hour, they drove away. But the thought stayed with them. The house that had seemed so easy at first now felt like a wall they could not climb. Maya's preparation, inside Maya indeed knew she was being watched. Her instincts never lied. Though she did not see their car, she felt the weight of eyes on her home. She stood at her window for a long time, her silhouette visible under the light. She wanted them to see her. She wanted them to know she was not hiding. Later, she opened her closet again and looked at her uniform. She touched the fabric gently. For years it had stayed folded, but now it had returned to her life with purpose. She whispered to herself, "Strength is not in fear. Strength is in standing." A night of reflection, as the clock neared midnight again, Maya sat quietly with her notebook. She wrote about the silence, the waiting, and the sense that the shadows had not gone far. She was not angry, only focused. Her mind went back to her first mission years ago. She had been younger, nervous, unsure of herself, but her commander had said something she never forgot. When you stand firm, even the strongest storm passes around you. That memory filled her with peace. She did not need to chase the intruders. She did not need to shout or fight. She only needed to stand firm. That was enough. The intruders' doubt in their garage hideout, the men argued again. "This isn't worth it," Tom said firmly. "She's not like anyone else we've faced. She's strong." Ray slammed his fist on the table. "So what do you want us to do? Run forever?" "Sometimes walking away is wiser," the youngest said quietly. Ray looked at each of them. He saw the fear in their eyes, but also something else, respect. They had not respected him, but they respected her. That truth burned him more than anything else. He said no more, but deep inside he knew he would return. Pride would not let him stay away. Maya's calm before what comes. As the days passed, Maya continued her routine. She worked in her garden, spoke kindly with neighbors, and kept her home in order. To anyone else, she looked like an ordinary woman, but at night she kept her watch. The shadows outside grew restless. Sometimes she heard a car engine. Sometimes she felt the quiet shift in the air, yet she never wavered. She stood tall, her marine uniform always close by, and though the men believed they were watching her, it was Maya who was truly watching them. She was ready for whatever came next, because she knew one thing clearly: storms always returned before they broke. The days in Riverdale passed with quiet regularity, but inside Maya's home the silence was not simple. It was sharp, watchful, filled with discipline. Each morning she woke early, checked her locks, and wrote notes in her small notebook. Each evening she sat near the window, listening for footsteps, waiting for the sound of wheels on the street. To her neighbors, she was still the quiet woman who had returned from service. But to Maya herself, she was once again on a mission. Her mission now was simple: protect her home, protect her peace, and stand firm against those who threatened it. A rumor in town one afternoon, Maya went to the small grocery shop on the corner of the street. The shopkeeper, Mr. Harris, greeted her with a polite smile, but she noticed his voice carried unease as he spoke. "Strange things happening lately," he said as he placed items in a paper bag. "Few folks have seen unfamiliar faces around town at night. Cars parked too long, people walking where they don't belong." Maya studied his face. "When did you hear this?" "Since last week," he replied. "People say it might be just kids, but I don't know. The way folks describe it, they sound restless, like they're watching something." Maya nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." She left with her bag of groceries, her mind sharper than before. So the shadows were not only near her home, they were stirring through the town. That meant they were not finished. They were waiting for the right moment, the intruder's plan. Again, in their dim garage, the four men argued once more. Ray, the leader, would not let the memory of that night rest. His pride burned too deeply. "We can't let her think she scared us off forever," he said, slamming a wrench onto the table. "We go back, but this time we don't run." Tom shook his head. "Ray, you saw her. She's different. I don't want to step near that house again." The youngest man added, "She's not afraid of us, and I don't think she ever will be." But Ray's pride was heavier than reason. "That's why we have to go. We can't let her win without even trying." Though the others hesitated, they finally agreed, not out of courage, but out of loyalty to the bond they shared with Ray. None of them wanted to admit fear. They chose the night carefully. They would return when the street was quiet, when the world slept. Their plan was simple: step inside, take what they wanted, and prove to themselves that she was not untouchable. But their plan, though clear to them, was already known to Maya in spirit: Maya's preparation. That evening, Maya felt the air grow heavier. She could not explain how she knew, but her instincts told her the time was near. She moved through her home with calm steps, securing the locks, checking the curtains, and keeping her notebook close. She laid her marine uniform on the bed, smoothing out the fabric with steady hands. She did not wear it right away. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed and reflected. She thought of her commander's words from years ago. "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is standing even when fear whispers at your door." She breathed deeply and whispered back to herself, "I will stand." As the sky darkened, she put on her uniform once again. The fabric fit her like armor, carrying with it memories of nights on foreign soil, of watchful silence, of unshaken resolve. The night breaks. It was close to 1 a.m. when Maya heard it, the faint sound of tires on the street. She sat quietly in her living room chair, the lights off, her eyes sharp. A car rolled slowly and stopped near her driveway. 4 shadows stepped out, their voices hushed. Ray whispered to the others, "This time we don't back down." Maya did not move at once. She waited, letting them draw closer. She could hear the crunch of gravel under their shoes, the creak of the porch step, the same sounds as before. Her heart was steady, her breathing slow. The men reached the door. She heard the quiet scrape of metal against the lock again. Maya rose from her chair, her uniform catching the faint glow of moonlight through the window. She walked to the door with calm steps. This time she did not wait for them to break in. She unlocked the door herself and swung it open in one strong motion. The men froze just as they had before, but this time Maya did not stand in shadow. The moonlight poured across her uniform, making every metal, every line, every fold clear. Her presence filled the doorway with power. Ray's eyes widened. She knew we were coming. He muttered. Maya's voice rang steady. You came back. None of them spoke. The silence pressed heavy. You're standing on my ground, she said, and you will not cross this line. The standoff Ray tried to force courage into his voice. You don't own this street. You can't tell us what to do. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained calm. I don't need to shout to be obeyed. Leave now and do not return. The youngest intruder shifted uneasily. Race, maybe we should go. Ray glared at him. No, we're not running this time. Maya stepped forward, the weight of her boots against the porch making the men tense. You think numbers make you strong, she said. But strength is not numbers. Strength is discipline. Strength is courage. And you have neither. Her words cut through them. The men exchanged nervous glances. Ray clenched his jaw, unwilling to retreat again. We're not afraid of you. Maya looked him in the eye. Yes, you are. Her voice was so certain, so unwavering that even Ray felt the truth press against him. A choice to make. The men stood frozen, caught between pride and fear. Tom finally broke the silence. She's right, Ray, look at her. We don't belong here. Let's leave, the youngest added quickly. If we stay, we'll regret it. Even the fourth man, who had said little before, nodded silently. Ray looked at them, his pride cracking as he realized he was standing alone in his defiance. His friends were no longer with him in spirit. They were with her. For a moment, his face burned with anger. But then he stepped back slowly. His pride could not hold against the weight of her presence. Maya did not move until they turned fully and walked away. She stood tall, her eyes never leaving them, until they reached their car. The engine started, and the car rolled slowly into the night. Maya's resolve when silence returned. Maya closed the door gently and locked it once more. She stood in her living room, her uniform still pressed neatly against her shoulders, and let out a deep breath. She had not raised a hand, she had not shouted, but she had won the battle of will. The intruders had come back, and they had left again, defeated not by force but by the strength of her spirit. She returned to her notebook and wrote carefully, They came again. They left again. They will not return a third time. As she wrote, her heart was calm. She knew the storm had broken. A new dawn when morning came, Maya stepped outside to her porch. The marks on the door were still there, but now they meant something different. They were no longer scars of danger. They were signs of battles faced and won. Her neighbor, Mr. Allen, waved from across the street. Morning, Maya, quiet night? She gave a small smile. Yes, quiet now. Inside, she placed her uniform back in the closet. She smoothed the fabric one last time. Her reflection in the mirror strong and steady. The uniform would rest again, but she knew she did not need to wear it to carry its strength. The Marine in her was always present, always ready. And in the quiet heart of Riverdale, Maya's home stood as more than a house. It stood as a reminder that courage could turn away even the darkest shadows. The morning sun spread warm light across Riverdale, washing the streets in soft gold. Birds chirped from the trees, and the town slowly woke to the rhythm of another ordinary day. But in her home, Maya felt something extraordinary. The tension that had gripped the past few nights had lifted. The intruders had come back, tried to challenge her, and left defeated, not by force but by the calm strength she carried. That strength, honed in years of service, had been enough to protect her home and her peace. Maya stood by her window looking at the street below. The leaves moved gently in the breeze, and for the first time in days she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The storm had passed. Reconnecting with the town that morning, she decided to take a walk. She left her home unlocked, though the locks were strong, a sign of trust in her community. She strolled down the quiet street, greeting neighbors who smiled as she passed. Mr. Allen waved from his porch. Morning, Maya, you look well today. Good morning, Mr. Allen, she replied. It's a peaceful day, he nodded. I'm glad to hear that. You handled things well. Maya's smile was soft but steady. Thank you. It was not just about handling things. It was about staying calm and standing firm. A friendly visit as she walked further. Clara appeared from her house across the street, carrying a basket of flowers this time. I thought I'd bring some color to your day, Clara said with a grin. Maya accepted them with warmth. Thank you, Clara. You've been very kind. Clara's eyes sparkled. I'm just glad you're safe. You were brave, you know. I've never seen anything like it, Maya laughed softly. Bravery is quiet sometimes. It does not need to shout. It just needs to stand no matter what. Clara nodded slowly. Well, standing worked. Everyone in town should know what you did. Maya shook her head. I do not need recognition. I only need to live in peace and help others feel safe too. The intruder's lesson. Meanwhile, the 4 men who had attempted to enter Maya's home were far away, in their own lives, reflecting silently. Ray, the leader, felt something heavy in his chest. The first true lesson he had ever received about respect and courage. He had gone back expecting to prove himself, but instead he had learned that true strength was not in force or numbers. The calm, firm presence of Maya had defeated him without a fight. For the first time, he and the others discussed the idea of change. Maybe some things can't be solved by pushing forward recklessly, Tom said quietly. Ray nodded. We have to respect people no matter who they are. I can't forget the way she stood. That's a lesson I won't ignore. Even though they had been filled with pride and false courage, the experience left a mark on them. They realized that standing firm in the face of fear was stronger than trying to intimidate others. Maya prepares for tomorrow. Back in her home, Maya walked through each room. She straightened the curtains, checked the locks, and set her notebook on the table. Each detail mattered, even in quiet days. She placed her Marine uniform neatly in the closet. Though she had not needed it to fight physically, wearing it had reminded her of her inner strength. Strength did not only come from uniforms or medals, it came from discipline, calmness, and courage in the face of uncertainty. Her coffee cup sat steaming on the kitchen table, and she allowed herself a moment of quiet. She thought about the nights she had spent waiting, watching, counting, and standing. The tension had taught her patience, alertness, and how to read people without them knowing. Maya smiled softly. She did not need anyone else to approve her courage. It existed quietly within her, sharing strength. With the community over the next few days, Maya began taking small steps to make her neighborhood safer, not by fear or force, but by example. She met with neighbors to discuss safety tips, small habits to protect their homes, and ways to look out for each other. Mr. Allen and Clara helped organize a community watch group. It was not about suspicion or confrontation. It was about awareness, courage, and standing together. Maya spoke simply and clearly. Strength is calmness. Courage is standing when others might run. Together we make our community safe not through fear, but through vigilance and care. Her neighbors listened and followed her advice. They felt safer knowing someone like Maya lived among them, a person who stood firm, unshaken, and wise. The final quiet night weeks later, Maya sat on her porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. The streets were quiet. The breeze carried the scent of flowers from her garden. She had not heard from the men again. Whether they had changed their ways or simply moved on, she did not know. But she did not worry. Fear did not control her life, and shadows could not linger in the light of calm determination. Maya leaned back in her chair and let herself breathe fully. Her home was peaceful again, her heart steady, her mind clear. She knew that courage was not just about confronting danger. It was about standing firm every day, in small actions and in quiet strength. The Marine in her had guided her through the night, and now, even without wearing the uniform, that same spirit lived within her. A life of quiet strength as days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Maya's life in Riverdale became a quiet example of courage and discipline. She continued her work, helped her neighbors, and lived with calm alertness. Stories of the midnight intruders faded from local gossip, but the lesson remained. Courage could stop fear before it even entered a home. Maya never boasted of her strength, but those who observed her closely understood. Standing firm, staying calm, and acting with wisdom were more powerful than any shout, any weapon, or any number. And in the heart of Riverdale, Maya's home remained a symbol of quiet strength, a place where courage lived not in force, but in presence. Closing reflection, Maya looked around her home one last time that evening. She ran her fingers gently over her medals, touching the years of training, discipline, and service they represented. She whispered softly to herself, "Strength comes from within. Courage comes from standing when it matters most. Peace comes from knowing you are ready. And with that, she turned off the lights, closed her doors, and rested. For Maya, the night no longer carried fear. It carried quiet power, the kind that cannot be broken by shadows, intruders, or the unknown. Riverdale slept peacefully, but Maya remained ever watchful, ever disciplined, and ever strong. The story of the midnight intruders had ended, but her lesson of courage lived on quietly in her home, and in the hearts of those who learned from her example.